Hello, this is Deborah Clay, author of The Borrowed Boy and Just Be, and presenter of Castaway Books. Each week I invite one of my favourite authors to tell me about the books that have inspired their life and influenced their writing. This week I'm talking to Gerald Hornsby. So I'm delighted to welcome Gerald Hornsby to my desert island, Castaway Books, particularly because Gerald, as well as being a favourite author, he's particularly my favourite author because he's a fellow author of the Frinton Writers Group, which we've both belonged to for some time. So it's doubly welcome you. And as the first man to be on Castaway.
Hey, it's fantastic. Yeah, I'm so pleased to be here. It's very exciting and it's great to be able to think back at books that I've really enjoyed, why I've enjoyed them, and why particularly at that time in my life they were enjoyable. So it's been I spent ages doing it, but yeah, it was really good to do. It's very interesting.
Well, we're looking forward to hearing about them. But first of all, I'll introduce you properly because you have been very prolific as a writer, particularly in the last year or so with your novels. But you have written 4 books on writing craft, which are very popular, and I have personally found them very helpful. You've written 2 short story collections. You've written 2 under the name of Gerald Hornsby in the Jerry Saunders series, with the 3rd one due out shortly. And you've also written 4 books under the name of Jack Warwick, which I think was slightly different genre, were they? They were thriller?
Yes, they're thrillers. They're sort of standalone thrillers, whereas the Jerry Saunders books are part of a series.
Right. And I say you've been prolific. You're getting out 4 books a year. You're writing every 3 months. You're producing a novel, which is phenomenal. And you're writing alongside that how to be an efficient novelist, as a writing craft, how you achieve that. And understand you're going to be presenting that at the Swanwick Summer School this year.
Yes, that's right. I'm basically taking July off from writing novels, and I'm going to be writing the book and also the online course and the in-person course for the efficient novelist, which is the whole idea is that you rapidly build up a sort of a set of books, each of which builds your career, if you like, your writing career, and hopefully, certainly with me anyway, I'm seeing increases in my royalty income year on year. So yeah, it's quite an exciting time.
It is very exciting, and everybody would want to follow that and learn from your experience, which is great. Now, the interesting thing is you are my favourite author because you're on the Frinton Writers Group, but the genre you write in isn't one that I would typically be reading, although I have read your work because we've shared it in critiques as fellow writers, and I do love your work. Yeah. But it also means that the books you've chosen are ones I'm less familiar with when I talk to authors who have similar reading interests to me. So this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it is interesting, yes, to see that difference. Yeah,
will appeal to a male audience as well through my interview.
I hope so.
So you've started off by being cheeky, and you've chosen 2 books to start. That's okay. Do you want to tell us about them?
Yeah, the reason I've chosen 2 is that because these 2 books were the ones that really started my reading life. Basically, I would have read some short books and children's books before this, but it was I must have been below less than 10. But the 2 books I've chosen were 2 Years Before the Mast by Richard Henry Darner Jr. and The 39 Steps by John Buchan, both old books, 1840 and 1915. But it was really, it changed. They took me on a world of adventure, basically. And I think a lot of the other authors you've had on have talked about, like the famous 5 and the adventures that they went on. and for me, it wasn't so much about the sort of children going on adventures, but adult, grown-up adventures, which I really sort of sparked some interest in me.
Well, I read the 39 Steps under duress at school, and I hated it so much that I was made to read it, and I was about 12, that I put off watching the film, which came on every Christmas, and I put it off for years and years and years, and only watched it in the last year and really enjoyed it. So I denied myself the pleasure of the book and the film because of my memory from there. So you and The Mast, I was reading about that before talking with you today. That was quite a technical book about sailing and things, wasn't it? They're both very grown-up books for a young reader.
Yeah, it was, and I think, although I didn't understand all of the terms, I thought the idea of sailing on the ocean to faraway lands is I don't know, it's like a world of adventure that I hadn't really experienced before. So it was just something, some spark inside me. I thought, oh, this is, really good. I enjoyed reading it so much.
So you're reading these books, which are very much about escapism and a world that you were looking forward to. Did you have any aspirations then as a young Gerald about what life as an adult might be like? Were you looking for adventure?
That's an interesting question. Not really, because we were quite a sort of in a way quite a normal family. We were working class. My father was a toolmaker. My mum worked part-time jobs in the school, cleaning classrooms and things like that. I had two older brothers, both went into engineering through apprenticeships. So it was almost, so when I had in senior school, when I went to the careers advice, they say, do you know what I want to be? And I say, yeah, I want to be an engineer, like my dad and my two brothers. And they said, okay, fair enough, tick. And that was it. There was no sort of, there are other options available to you. I think they thought, oh, good, he knows what he wants to do. I'll get on to the next one. So no, there was no real sense of adventure.
Were you excited about being an engineer, or did it just feel like a path you were expected to take?
It wasn't so much. I didn't feel any pressure to take that path. Was I excited? Not really. I became excited later on, which I'll probably come on to, but no, it was very firmly, you went out to work, you did your job, you got paid, you came home. It was that sort of mentality that there was no sort of reaching beyond the confines of what you knew. There was no, it was quite a strict house, and it's quite a traditional home. My father didn't have much to do with the children. My mother brought up all the children sort of virtually on her own. So it was, yeah, it was quite, there was no sort of great exploration. I joined the Boys Brigade when I was 11. So we went camping and went on expedition with them and weekends away and that sort of thing. And I enjoyed all that. But there was no sort of thought, oh, I could take this and then move on and do something else, or become a park ranger or something. It was like, no, I'm going to, my job is going to be an engineer, and that's it. Which is a bit strange, but.
Much older than you?
Sorry?
Were your brothers much older than you?
Yes, one was 5 years older and one's 7 years older. So, in a way, they both of them had sort of friends that were both friends of them. And I was, a lot of the time, I felt like an only child. I didn't realise I was an only child, but I felt like it because I couldn't join in. And there's a very traumatic tale when my two brothers went off with their mates cycling, and I wanted to go with them. But I wasn't allowed on the road. So they were cycling on the road and they said, go back, Gerald, go back. I said, no, I want to come with you. So I was cycling on the pavement till the junction when I couldn't go any further. I wasn't allowed to go any further. And they sort of turned the junction, went off, and I cried. So it's, yeah, it was sort of, is that sort of feeling that, oh, okay, they're doing that, I'm something different. So that might have had some sort of effect.
Yes, that was hard.
Yeah, a little bit. I just, it's just what it was. You don't, I was sort of brought up to think these little knockbacks, you just deal with them and move on.
Did you have friends of your own age?
Yes, I did. School friends, and they sometimes came round, but they all seem to end up having the mickey taken out of them by my brother, who thought they were strange. But they were good friends. So yeah.
So shall we go on to your second book?
Yeah.
Because you cheated again.
Yeah, well, and I've cheated a lot. I've gone for the classic Lensman series by E. Doc Smith, which is a set of six or seven sci-fi, sort of really hard sci-fi books that I read when I was in sort of mid-teens, I think.
And I looked a little bit about them, and I didn't get much of a feel for them. I looked about the first one. So were there lots of them in this series?
Yeah. As I say, I think there was six or seven. I can't remember now. But I started with the first one and loved it so much. And again, it's a whole different world sort of thing. And I liked them because the premise was goodies versus baddies on an intergalactic scale, so no big deal there. But the key thing about it was that the goodies had developed their mental capabilities, and the baddies had developed their physical capabilities. So it was this clash between clever, intelligent, super intelligent people and roughy toughy beat 'em up kind of people. And as I think, as someone who was quite intelligent at the time, that it appealed to me. You didn't have to get involved in fighting. You could sort of think and bring your mind together with other people, and it's this whole sort of exploration of what the brain can do, what your mind can do, and then it started a virtual lifelong interest in psychology and telekinesis and things like that. Sort of things that there's a wider issue about belief systems as well. Whether you believe in something like a god or you believe in something else. And I sort of don't know. I don't know whether I'm an atheist or an agnostic or something, but I believe, I've got no problem with people who want to believe in a god, but I quite like the idea of not being aware of things that might be out there or available. I don't know if UFOs are real. I don't know, and I'm a very sort of practical kind of person. So to believe in something, I have to see it. But I do quite like the idea that there are some things that our brains are registering that we are not aware of. Mm-hmm. So that's a sort of kind of thing, and I also wondered whether people who at the time were traditionally called mad people and raving people, whether they actually were seeing things that we couldn't, because their mind wasn't so constricted and controlled. So if you sort of expanded your mind a bit more, maybe we could be more open to stuff. I don't know. It sounds a bit woo-woo, doesn't it? A bit sort of weird, but
yeah, when I worked in psychiatric hospitals some OT years ago, I used to find it interesting that if somebody hears voices and they've got a psychosis or schizophrenia, if you went way, way back, they would have been thought about, I don't know, had visitations or be thought of as being quite holy or something, to see things and hear. It used to.
Yeah, and people talking in voices, and you try and rationalize something that's very really irrational, and you try and bring it down to something that you can relate to on a sort of earthly, real world basis. And actually, maybe there are some things that aren't like that are just, which comes back to the books, because they're just using their power of their brains, and they connect their brains together. Telepathically, because they've developed all these skills, and they overcome the big butch baddies with the power of the brains, which is a fascinating idea, I thought.
And also, you saying, you're more into, you're an intelligent boy. I think it's really hard for young men. It's not so much now, but certainly when we were younger, hard for young men with identity, with the role models about being strong and all the things expected of them. Well, that must have really helped you as well to look at, a different ways of being, even though it was science fiction.
I think so, and I think so now. I think I would much rather talk to someone I disagree with than be angry with them, and try and understand. And I try to understand people's points of view and why they think certain things, and why they think things are bad that I think are good, and what is that perspective. And I think that's, as a writer, as writers, we're trying to put ourselves in our characters' heads all the time to put onto the page what they're feeling and what they're thinking and what they're seeing. And it's a bit like that. It's a bit like, so yes, this person's quite a nice, ordinary person, and he's got very strange beliefs. Why is that? What is it about this thing that you don't like or you do like? And yeah, it's understanding people, I think.
Interesting. So shall we go on to your third book?
Third book, yes. First, just one on its own. 1983. It's Berlin Game by Len Deighton.
I read up about that. That does sound, that did intrigue me. I thought, I would like to read that one. So tell us about
it's yeah. I read a lot of Len Deighton and John le Carré. This was I was in my mid-20s then. So I was, and there was something about them. I'd read some sci-fi, as we know. I'd read some horror. But I sort of started reading Len Deighton, and this book particularly, because it's got a jaded, middle-aged spy who was a normal person on the inside. So as a child, you always imagine yourself being somebody different, or having a different sort of life, or a superhero, like kids these days see themselves as. And it was a bit like that. It's a bit like an ordinary bloke that you would pass on the street and think nothing of it. But he was a head spy within Britain's MI6. So it's like John le Carré's George Smiley, which came a little bit before this. But this is Len Deighton's version of it, which I liked. He's a bit more sarcastic. He's a bit more sort of like me, a bit more sort of earthy and down to earth. And so there were nine of these books altogether in 3 series, which I just, as soon as I got a new one, I just devoured it. I just loved them. They were really, great books, great characters, and that I never really got on with the James Bond type of spies, the sort of slightly misogynistic, the sort of cocktail drinking, fast car driving. James Bond was someone I had no connection with. I had no idea what baccarat was, and what a cocktail was. I'd never come across those. But Len Deighton's Bernard Sampson was someone like I imagined I could be in a few decades time from then. And it's these sort of hidden characters that looking behind the facade and seeing something what people really are behind the front that they put on for people.
So how old were you then? And were you still living, was it Birmingham you came from?
Yeah, I'd been born in Birmingham. I was my two brothers had been born in Yorkshire, in Halifax, and the family had come down to Birmingham in the year before I was born. And as my birthday's in September, and I remember sitting on the top of the stairs once, listening with my father talking to a friend of his, and saying, "Well, you know what it's like with Christmas in a new house." And I sort of thought, "What's he talking about?" And I thought, "Oh, Christmas plus 9 months is my birthday." Oh, so yeah, so that was a bit strange. So, and since then, obviously, there's a lot of people with birthdays towards the back end of September. I thought, oh, okay. Yes. So I was the only one. My dad had been born in Birmingham, and he'd worked up in Yorkshire during the war. He'd been stationed up there and met my mum up there, who was a Yorkshire woman, and they'd lived up there, had my two brothers. And then later on, they'd moved down to Birmingham and then had me. I'm sure it wasn't an afterthought, but there was quite a big gap. And I'd been living in Birmingham. It was sort of, officially we were Solihull, but we were right on the edge of Solihull. Solihull's quite posh. Birmingham was sort of next door to it and looked down upon, and we were sort of right on the border, so the cheaper end of Solihull. But yeah, when I was reading these, I was still at home. I'd moved out to a flat with my girlfriend. So yeah, it was. I'd been.
Had you finished training? Had you finished training?
Yeah,
then.
Yeah, I'd done my apprenticeship. I left school at 16, so I did 2 years of an apprenticeship, which then transposed into an extra 4 years as a like a graduate apprenticeship. So they sent me to university, even though I left school at 16. Said, enough. Sixth form. No, I don't want to stay on. So yeah, and I'd finished that, and I'd got a pretty good job. So yeah, I sort of set fair. That was my career. I was doing something I really loved, and really enjoying these books.
Excellent, good. And had you thought about writing at that time, that you might be a writer one day?
A little bit. I remember, strangely, I remember writing a spy story when I was must have been grammar school. Writing like 2 or 3 page spy story, and drew a little picture, somebody trying to escape from East Berlin and that sort of thing. And I really enjoyed that, and I got a great mark for that. So that's really encouraging. I'm sorry if there's noise coming through. They're mowing the grass outside. So that was, and I'd enjoyed when it came time to choose your subjects for O levels, and they said, "Well, you're obviously going to do English language and English literature." I said, "No, I don't want to do English literature. I don't want to read the Mayor of Casterbridge and that sort of thing." I said, "I want to concentrate on my English language," and they lots of scratched heads, but I did that. So I quite. I think I'm quite sort of good with spelling and punctuation and that sort of thing, because I concentrated on English language and made sure I got, what was it, grade 1A? I don't know. My English, I got top grade in English anyway, so it seemed to work. Yes, exactly.
So onto your 4th book, leads in quite nicely to that.
Yes, which is much later. Yes, you'd asked me about writing. So I'd done that at school. I'd written a couple of little stories for my daughter, like you do. But my career had been sort of not all consuming, but I'd got to the stage where I had a very responsible job, company director, 50 odd employees. I was flying all around the world. It sounded quite glamorous, but it wasn't. There was a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. and I was wondering, and one of my colleagues lost his wife to cancer. They were in their 40s with 2 young children, and it's sort of just, you have these times in your life when suddenly something sort of twists or clicks. I thought, what's life all about? And I'd been on this sort of more responsibility. They were going to, they told me later on that I was their great hope for managing director of the company, to take it forward and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, no, it's not worth it. There must be something in life. So I started thinking about stepping down from that and looking at possibilities. And this was about the time that Stephen King's book on writing came out, which is a classic. It's I don't have a lot of books, but I have it here. I love Stephen King. I've read a lot of his books. Shining was the first book I'd read of his. Christine I'd read. And I went through a stage where I'd read everything that he put out, every single book. So thinking about writing and thinking about, a job where I could, work 9 to 5 and no weekends, was quite a revelation, which would give me time to look into writing. And this book, I love how he writes. He's very direct, quite simple, non-flowery way of writing, and he talks about that in the book. And it just seems so accessible to me, that I could write like he wrote, maybe not in the same genre, but that sort of style of writing, that way of getting your story across, and the story is the main thing. So I really, I've read it twice, 3 times. I don't normally read books more than once, but this book is a wonderful, and I like the fact because he'd had a literally near-death experience the year before, got run over by a truck, and and he talks about that as well, and that sort of clicked in with my thinking. Yeah, things like that can happen even to him. So, should I be looking to do what I really want to do and what I've wanted to do for some time and not been able to? So yeah, it was just popped along at the right moment.
That was very brave, though, to go from a successful, well-paid career to, you knew, I'm sure you knew that you weren't going to earn lots of money as a writer.
Yes.
So yeah, taken a lot of thought.
Oh yeah. I mean, I still had a job. I worked as a technician in schools. I was on about half the salary that I used to be on, but it was enough, and I quite enjoyed that sort of newfound freedom. Not that the sort of the anxiety coming onto a Friday where there's something happening at the weekend or something needs to be done before Monday, and you're going to have to go into work on the Saturday, probably all day, maybe some of Sunday, and the problems that caused at home and things like that. So you just sort of think, I remember the very first time I went into schools and I had a list of jobs to do, computers to fix, basically. It was a computer technician. And I said to the teacher came up to see me at the end of the day and said, how did you get on? I said, well, I've got this done, but I haven't been able to get through to these 2 other things yet. And she said, oh, do them next time. And I almost fell off my chair, because to me, the whole career had been, well, you're obviously going to stay and get it done. That's what, for decades, that's what I'd done. If something needed doing, you stayed until it was finished. And just the fact that I said, oh, what, start on those next time, I thought, oh my word, this is what real life is like.
I remember, I can't remember which job it was in, probably when I was at the Audit Commission. I remember a revelation like that, because I was trying to get everything done. And then I realised, however hard I worked, however long I worked, I was never, ever going to get it all done. So all I could do was set myself goals for each day. And I've been, like you, I'm sure, been very disciplined about setting myself things and getting them done. But if you try and do everything, sometimes it's just not possible. You drive yourself crazy, don't you?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember I had a job at one point in Telford, and it was, yeah, it was very high pressure. The company had used millions of pounds of investors' money getting these products to market, and then they weren't going right, and there were problems. So pressure, pressure, pressure. And I said to my sort of section leader at the time, I said, "Look, I know we're under pressure, but I've got these holidays booked now. If I can have them later in the year," he said, "Take them." I said, "Well, no, because we're so busy." He said, "No, it's always going to be a bad time. So take them when you want them." And that's another thing that stuck with me. And so when I became in a position where people came to me and said, "Look, I can't do this," because I said, "Fine, we'll do it. We'll deal with it, because it's not worth killing yourself for the sake of a job."
You strike me as somebody who is very calm, and even if I can't think of the right word for it, you don't get very stressed. You're very sort of steady and calm, which is good.
I am pretty steady. I'm passionate about some things. I'm passionate about writing. I'm passionate about politics. I'm passionate about climate change. I'm passionate about certain things which come through in my writing. But I try not to get myself worked up over things, because it's just not worth it. You're much better dealing with things in a calm way if you can.
It also makes you a
Mind
calm
you,
influence on people.
I watch them in Parliament, and I think I couldn't be an MP, because I wouldn't be able to stop myself jumping up and saying, "You're lying."
I know very from your novels as well. You're very interested in politics. Have you ever been interested in being a local councillor?
No, I had some experience of local councils, and there are obviously some really, really good people who do their best for the communities and the people that they're serving. But there's a lot of people who just in it for themselves, even at local level. And it's hard to imagine, but I saw so many, and I just think that's not right. And this is another thing that just drives me: honesty, and the way people can have a job and say they're doing this job and then not be honest about it, and so that sort of bugs me. And I've not. No, I thought, no, I don't. I'll just let them get on with it. I'll do what I want to do.
Okay, so let's go on to your fifth book.
The fifth book. Oh, and another one I've got. The book is Down to a Sunless Sea by David Graham. 2007 this came out, and again it was sort of it carries on from the what we were just saying about politics, and it's a sort of fairly standard apocalyptic novel, end of the world, nuclear war, that sort of thing. So in that way, it's not very. I just read the on the front cover. It says, "We commence all crews and passengers in transit to the mercy and love of Almighty God this night of Armageddon. Message ends." I thought, what a great thing to put on. Yeah, and you think, "Oh, what's going on there?" So I think it shows that, well, it's in the book. It shows that politicians are prepared to destroy the whole planet to try and prove a point. And there's things where I'm quite anti-war. I'm very anti-war, where ordinary people are sent to risk their life for political ends. And when I say that, people say, "Oh, what about Second World War?" I say, yeah, that's, there are sometimes things are unnecessary, but a lot of wars are fought because a politician wants it to be fought. So in this thing, and the great thing about this, it's quite character based too. So there are a main character, and then there were two main characters, and there's the whole sort of there's bombs going off across the world, and they're one of the few planes in the air when it happens. So they I think they're going from London to America, New York or something, and the airport closes down. So they then there's, I won't spoil the story, but it's a really page turning story, and it's got politics, it's got apocalyptic risks, and it's got a really, to me, it's a funny ending, which is both sad and positive at the same time. So it's a great book, and I've read this one several times too, and I lost it. I think I lent it to someone, and I've been looking for it, I hadn't been able to find it, so I bought it off eBay.
Excellent.
For about £1.50 or something. It's it smells like an old book. It's lovely.
Sounds like a really good read. So how does
it is?
So you've talked about science fiction and this last one, a real thriller and political intrigue and spies. What genre did you decide? Have you tried different genres, or did you stick on one from the outset?
Yeah, I've tried. Since I sort of, because I changed jobs in 2001, something 2002. Since 2003, I've been writing seriously, part-time, obviously, until fairly recently. But writing seriously and working on my short fiction, initially literary short fiction. So I've written apocalyptic thrillers, I've written political thrillers, I've tried to write fantasy. I couldn't write fantasy. I thought this would be fun. Tried to write sci-fi, couldn't do that. Humor, no, I put bits of humor in my books, but I can't write a funny book. So I think as an author, I think you need to experiment a bit and try to write. And in the past few years, through Frinton Writers Group, actually, I've been able to look at what I've written and what I've been writing and why I write it, and what the themes are behind what I want to write. And so it's been really good. So I still love my thrillers, and I will go back to writing. I have, a few, a number of ideas in the works for thrillers. But I love writing my crime. I love the sort of plucky amateur crime solver. I like people, and I like the sort of sense of community and characters that are working behind the scenes.
Which comes over very well in your Jerry Saunders series, of course, and the Jack
Thank
Warren
you. Yes.
Thriller, isn't it? Politically.
Yeah. Yeah. There are various things. I mean, one of them is about how people can get drawn into political issues, even though they've got no interest. So that was corruption, and deceit is about lying in government. Wildfire is apocalyptic, end of the world type thing, as is Meltdown, with a political, there's local politics in that as well. So yeah, it was so there's all those issues that are at the back of my head, and they come out through my writing without really needing to try. I like to think that the themes come through without readers being hit over the head with them.
Indeed. And will there be any more Jack Warwick books?
I think so. Yes, I think so. I think there'll be. There's a big book that I've been meaning to write, and I'm not sure how I'm going to write it, because it's a big story. So it might have to spread across 2 or 3 books. So I might think of that. But for the moment, Jerry Sanders is what I'm working on, and I think next one is going to be a different series, but more a traditional cozy series, small village, sort of Miss Marple type thing, but it, up to date.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Good. You're talented that you can write in slightly different genres successfully. Very good.
Thank you.
So,
yeah.
Come to the end now to one last thing to ask you, and that is your luxury. And however ways I get around it, whenever I talk to authors, they always find ways of getting as many books as possible. You can have all the books.
Well, strange.
I know.
Well, strangely, it's not about books. I don't know if I'm allowed, but my first choice would be Twitter. Just that's all. I'm not looking. Yeah, I'm not. I don't want the internet. I don't want YouTube particularly, but Twitter. And if not, then I would like a bike, because I love cycling. So I'd be able to get around the island on my bike. So that would be nice.
Yeah, it sounds great fun.
Yeah.
Well, there's such a great writers community on Twitter, or on social media, but especially on Twitter.
Yes.
Very supportive.
Yeah. And it is, and it makes me laugh sometimes, and I like the fact that the only people that I follow are the people. It's like an echo chamber, but it's nice, and you can poke fun at people, which is great. I like politicians; they're allowed to poke fun at them.
Excellent. It's been a pleasure having you on my Castaway Island, Gerald, and wish you success with your book on the efficient novelist, and people
Thank you.
At the Swanwick Summer School. So thank you very much.
Yes, lovely.
Goodbye.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this week's episode of Castaway Books. References for all of the books discussed in this show can be found on my website, which is www.abrakdeborah.wordpress.com. It's the letter K and then my name, Deborah, Deborah. So until next week, goodbye.